Good afternoon, friends and guests. Welcome to Zeitz MOCAA. It is our second exhibition opening post-COVID lockdown period, so it's always wonderful to welcome you to the museum. My name is Janse van Rensburg. I'm Senior Curator, and it's a big honor to also introduce an extraordinary project for not only the museum, but for the continent. It's also a privilege and honor to do a project with one of the world's most extraordinary artists, Alfredo Jaar. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have an introduction now, then we're going to invite you to the second floor to see the installation. And at 6 o'clock, just before 6, we're going to ask you to come back down here, where we will have a Q&A with Alfredo and Koyo Kouoh. And on that note, a big pleasure to introduce you to Koyo Kouoh, our Executive Director and Chief Curator, who's currently in Dakar. And so Koyo, you're tuning in from there. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Bravo. Thank you so much, Storm. Good afternoon to Cape Town. And it's a pleasure for me to open the second exhibition after lockdown. And I hope it's the last one I am opening from afar. I'm on my way back to the museum in a couple of weeks. It is an immense privilege for me personally to have this exhibition finally at the museum. Alfredo Jaar, the Rwanda Project. The exhibition was totally ready to open in March when lockdown came upon us. So it's an immense joy to have this exhibition, to open this exhibition today. I think that I will not say much about it. You will have a tour. And it is a very profound, intense show. And we will come back together to have a conversation with Alfredo. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your interest. I really hand over to you, to Storm, and to the team to walk you through. And I see you in about an hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Koyo. Also to say that the Alfredo Jaar, the Rwanda Project, is the first time that the exhibition is shown on the continent. So it's also a very significant moment for us to look and reflect not only on this particular event happening, trauma that occurred over 26 years ago, but also kind of for us to reflect on that in relation to our own context. I'm going to ask Michael, Jacobs, Siseko, Tammy, and Tanzani to please take smaller groups up into the second floor. We only allow 5 people at a time into a lift, so if you please can kind of make yourself groups, and I'm going to hand over to you, Michael. Maybe you take the first one, and please just kind of move in. I also want to mention that also on the second floor is a project by Harun Gansali, Line in the Sand. Harun is also joining us here today. So please also, if you have a couple of minutes, please pop in and say hello to Harun. Thank you. So yeah, I think we should start. Again, a warm welcome to you, Alfredo, who's joining us from New York City. As a very brief introduction, Alfredo Jaar is an artist, architect and filmmaker who lives and works in New York. He's known as one of the most uncompromising, compelling, and innovative artists working today. His work considers social justice issues through thought-provoking, conceptual works of art. And also welcoming back Koyo Kouoh, who's from Dakar. And thank you for joining us here. So we had an opportunity to go through the exhibition. I'm sure there are many questions. Koyo, I don't know if you have any opening remarks before we start the Q&A, or Alfredo, if there's any comments from you to start with. But I just want to say that welcome again. I know that this is a significant moment for you, also that the exhibition is on the continent, on the African continent. It has traveled all over the world for many, many years, in various incarnations. So yeah, it's really wonderful for us to also have you here and have the project with us. Great. Koyo, any comments from you about the process?
Hello, is it okay?
Yes.
Can I go on? Thank you, Storm. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Is Alfredo with us? The logistics is so that I cannot see him, and I need to see him in order to speak. Oh, here you are.
I am here. I am here.
Hello, Alfredo. How are you?
Fine, Koyo. Happy to be here.
Yes. Thank you so much for your generosity, for gifting us with this so profound exhibition. And I am particularly touched and endeared in a way to be the first institution on the continent in showing this very important exhibition that speaks so much to our recent history and also to many systems of social organization that unfortunately are still operating on the continent. So I like to say sometimes that that it is important as a curator, particularly for myself, it is important to identify artists who matter, because there are artists who matter and there are artists who don't. And in my understanding, in my practice, I have benefited from the knowledge and generosity of a few artists that have profoundly defined my way of looking at art, my way of engaging with artists. And I have the privilege to say that Alfredo Jaar is one of those. So even long before we started working together, I was totally enthralled and engaged and moved by your practice, to the point that it became at some moment quite urgent for me to be able to work with you. So the very fact why I say that you are an artist that matters, it's because I think that artistic practice is a field that fundamentally needs to speak to the urgencies of our time. There is in Vienna, there was the secession group in the early 20th century, and they have a beautiful building in Vienna, above which it's written, their artists, their freedom, and their time, their artists, something like that. And I think that particularly this Rwanda project, which for me I really put in perspective in the context of your entire practice, is once again a proof of your very incisive aesthetic, political reading of the times that you're in. And so I think before I even start asking you questions about this project, and I even wonder if we can have a real conversation about the Rwanda project, because everything is said and the words speak for themselves. I just want to remind that we were supposed to have this exhibition, to open this exhibition in March, and lockdown came, and the pandemic happened, and the museum closed for 7 months. But over the course, during the entire time that the museum was closed, and we with the curatorial team continued working on the projects that were on our table, and every one of us going through this experience in very particular ways, I couldn't help, and I have to say it very, very openly, I couldn't help to sort of bring in perspective the relationship between the figures that were coming down of COVID and the anxiety, the rightful anxiety and concern that the pandemic rose, and the entire global attention to it. I couldn't help but compare them to the figures of Rwanda. Within 3 months, 800,000 people slaughtered, to a total global indifference. So I would like to ask you, tell us how it was to go to Rwanda so freshly after the genocide.
Thank you, Koyo. Before I answer that question, I want to say how moved I am for this opening, and I'm so sorry and sad that I'm not there. As you mentioned, it's the first time this work is shown physically in the African continent, in probably the most extraordinary museum in Africa with the most extraordinary director, you, Koyo. You know how much I admire you. And so I'm so thrilled that I'm opening this exhibition today, even at a distance. And I want to thank everyone in the staff that has been extremely professional in installing the exhibition. I never thought this could be done at a distance with any city. And you have done it. You have done an extraordinary work. I've looked at the images, I've followed it on video, and the installation is exactly as I wanted to see it on my own. So thank you. And regarding your question, I had been following the Rwandan situation for many years before, from the mid-'80s. Uh-huh. And when the genocide started, I following it closer and accumulating newspapers, magazines, and video clips from news media. And it was shocking to see what I call the barbaric indifference of the world community. As you mentioned, 1 million people were killed in less than 100 days. And the world was looking the other way. Governments had put in place instructions not to mention the word genocide, because those who signed the United Nations Charter have the obligation to stop genocide if it is happening. It's an obligation if you are a member of the UN. And so it was very important for these governments to not even use the word genocide. So they instructed their governments and the press, their local press around the world, not to use that word. What the moment that made me decide to go was when the Security Council of the United Nations met. There were 15 members, the 5 permanent members and 10 rotating members of the UN Security Council. And General Dallaire, who was in charge of the UN troops in Rwanda, a Canadian general, sent a fax to the Security Council telling them very clearly, a genocide will start soon. I can stop it now. Just give me the okay. These 15 members of the Security Council met, and they asked him to get out. So this genocide could have been avoided had any of these 15 members of the Security Council accepted the suggestion from General Dallaire to intervene before the genocide started.
Mm-hmm.
It was at that moment that I decided to go to Rwanda.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my most difficult project. What I saw is still embedded in my heart, in my brain, in my visual system. And I will never be able to get it out. And what I did was a series of exercises that failed completely. Everyone failed, but I had to make these exercises to try to represent something that, one, is unrepresentable, and two, someone that nobody cared about. So that was the difficulty, the dilemma I faced as an artist. And I did what I could.
Mm-hmm.
Chinua Achebe, a Nigerian writer that I met a few times, that I admire deeply, said that art is our attempt to change the order of reality that was given to us. To change the order of reality that was given to us. That is what art is, according to Chinua Achebe. And in all my career, I've been desperately trying to do exactly that, and I've failed. How do you change the order of reality that was given to us? I have no answer. That is why every work of mine is an exercise where I try a different strategy to see if it works better than the previous one. And as you know, I took more than 3,000 photographs of Rwanda, and I took hours and hours of video. And that's not what you see in the exhibition. Because in looking at what the media had done, I felt that this was not the way to do it. I had to find different ways. And these are my exercises in trying to communicate a difficult reality of the Rwandan people at the time. I've always said that I believe that photography cannot represent reality. Artists can only create new realities. And that is why photography is important, because we are creating a new reality different from the reality that we are trying to represent. And so what you have seen in this exhibition are new realities. And I would be happy to answer your questions if there are any specific questions about specific projects.
I would like to maybe just ask another question or add something else. What I profoundly, I wouldn't even say admire, what I think is really relevant and important in your work, and in the course of this, repeated, renewed exercise in changing reality, is that through your imagination and your interventions and the aesthetics that you employ, you bring an awareness that, of course, another field of news and so on does not bring. And particularly for this, for the Rwanda Project, I believe that for me, the show is not necessarily a show. It's a moment of recollection. And this is what I really invite you, the audience and the media, to understand. It's a moment of mourning, and it's a moment of commemoration. As I said earlier, we were supposed to have this show up during the time of the yearly commemoration of the Rwanda genocide. that are important commemoration, not only for the Rwandan people, but I think for the entire continent. I also, what I would like to maybe that you expand a little bit more, because your entire work is sort of, what runs through your entire work is this concern of changing the course of reality of people. And I am really deeply touched, because most of, the general, artists of your stature, artists of your, practice, a lot of art use and engage in important topics, but a lot sort of falls short because self-referentiality or ego comes a lot into play in the execution of certain ideas. Do you have a secret how you make works that are very precisely, very incisively, and aesthetically so grand without putting yourself in it?
That's a beautiful and generous question. Thank you. Perhaps it's architecture, because as you know, I'm an architect that makes art. I never studied art. And for an architect, context is everything. So what I do, I respond to the context. I analyze the context, I try to understand the context, and I try to determine what should I try to say within that context to the specific audience I'm talking to. So this methodology of the architect makes me, in a way, disappear from the work. Because we are responding to a given context. It's unthinkable for an architect to create anything without knowing where is the sun coming from and responding to that. Where is the wind coming from? What is the use of this space? So these are all the questions that architects ask of the project that they're working on, and they give themselves an objective. And so by following this methodology, there is no artist. The artists disappear. And I desperately try to respond to the questions asked by the context. And this has to do with trying to understand the context before acting. So going into site, talking to people, spending hours reading about the history, and seeing face to face the reality before you actually try to do something about it. That is why it was important to go to Rwanda and spend so much time there. I dedicated 6 years to this project. And since my early beginnings as an artist, my modus operandi has been the same, which is I will not act in the world before understanding the world. I will not act in the world before understanding the world. So by looking at what the media did, and by looking at the reality in situ, with that information and listening to the survivors, when you add all these things, this information, you process it. And the result is what you have in the museum right now. And the artist must be absent. It's a condition of this kind of work that respond to the context.
That's one last thing before we open the floor. Justice Sachs, Albie Sachs, who's one of the board members of the museum, and who's, I'm sure you're familiar with his incredible biography and incredible track record in terms of liberation movement in South Africa particularly. who wrote this beautiful introduction to the booklet that we are producing alongside your exhibition. What I retain is how can you make art from trauma? What kind of art does trauma produce? And I say it because internally in our curatorial team, ever since I took over the museum, we are having constant debates about the overcoming of trauma. South Africa is a pointing case as a traumatic space that needs healing. So does the Rwanda Project, is that your hope that the Rwanda Project participate in a form of healing, not only for the Rwandan people, but for all of us?
Absolutely. It's one of the main objectives. And your questions point to a very important reality, that life is trauma. Life is trauma. And trauma is the air we breathe. Perhaps now with COVID, there is a larger awareness that we live in trauma. But COVID is just one of the traumas that we are facing as human beings in the entire planet. There are many crises that have been accumulating for centuries, and there are many issues that have not been resolved. And perhaps COVID has helped us to see them more clearly. But we live in a world of trauma. It's just a question of looking around us, anywhere. So we have no choice. Artists must learn how to respond to trauma and offer a space of resistance to trauma. And this space of resistance, when it works, it becomes a space of hope. So in the Rwanda Project specifically, I wanted to create a memorial for the people of Rwanda. And I wanted to create a space of healing. And some works are closer than others. Perhaps some are more informative about the world reaction or lack of reaction, like the Newsweek work. Others are closer to offer a space of healing. But in the end, it's an attempt, it's an exercise that I feel that they mostly failed because there are no formulas. There are no formulas. And I'm an artist that I've never been afraid to say, I don't know. And that is why I'm an artist. Everything I've learned about the world, I've learned being an artist. But there are still so many things I don't know. And each work, each exercise of the Rwanda Project or any other project of mine is an attempt to answer that question. And in the end, I mostly say, I don't know. But I think it's important to incorporate that weakness, that impossibility, and it becomes part of the work.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. Really, thank you very much. Storm, do you want to take some questions from the media?
Thank you, Koyo. Sorry. Yes, please. Do you have any questions? And I'm just going to ask if you want to use a microphone. Yes, we have someone down there.
Yeah. First of all, can I congratulate you and thank you for a very profound and moving exhibition. And you talk about changing reality. That's just simply about communication and connecting with people so that they can see things differently. and respond differently, because there's lots of press out there, there's lots of media getting all sorts of report, news, fake news, all kinds of things. Maybe some of your things might be considered fake news as well. It's how you grab somebody's attention and make them deal with things. So I would argue, Spirit, that art can take on trauma. In fact, a lot of art does deal with it. Well, post-Holocaust art is trying to deal with it. They either try and go into denial or actually confront the issues. And this, I think, is a very beautiful way that you've done of teasing us to at least look at things and reassess and confront some of the things, and also see it in terms, it's not just about Rwanda, it's about seeing about what's going on now. And as you said, in people respond, particularly in the political world, people don't respond, they pretend. And I just have to see the documentary on Greta Thunberg, the thing that came across, never mind about her. But every single politician wants a photo opportunity with her, but they do nothing about climate change. So it's that falseness that you also are repressing. And so this is a really good question to say, when will you come here so we can actually meet you as well and talk about the profoundness of this particular exhibition? Thank you.
Alfredo, if you want to respond.
I'm not sure I understood exactly if there was a question or not. Was there a specific question? Maybe.
No, there was. I didn't get everything either, but I did. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You have an amazing opportunity with one of our most extraordinary minds, and knows you to do that. And I know, Saki, there's been a couple of questions that you've had while we did our walkabout today, so Alfredo, I want to maybe ask a question that we've been talking about a lot. It's maybe a harder question, which was around one of the images, the last work in the exhibition, which is 6 seconds, which I think kind of grapples for me in troubling ways and also in a good way about this impossibility of representation in many ways, but also trying to grasp at something. But it also is a work that kind of like fundamentally touches about the ethics of photography and the photographer in relation to subject. And I just want to ask us about, maybe if you don't mind talking about that moment, that interaction, and then also the refusal from the subject, from what we understand, of also being represented or photographed taken.
Thank you, Storm. Yes, I was in a refugee camp, and I had learned that this girl had lost her parents, and I wanted to talk to her. So someone arranged for me to approach her, and she accepted. So I went to see her, and we exchanged our gazes for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. We saw each other eye to eye. And then she was obviously terribly affected by her new situation, and didn't feel like talking. Perhaps shyness, but more than shyness was trauma. As you know, one of the works in the show, The Silence of Nduwayesu, is about a kid that saw his parents being killed in front of his eyes with machetes, and he remained silent for 6 weeks. That's a kind of trauma that children went through. So I suppose she was in a very traumatic state. So she couldn't talk to me. And so she turned around and left. And when this happened, I had my little camera, because I have a very modest camera. I spontaneously pushed the button to record that moment where she turned around and decides to leave. Just to remind me of that episode. And when I returned to New York and started for months analyzing the pictures I had taken, the worst pictures I had ever taken in my life, the most horrific ones ever, I discovered this image of this out of focus girl. I found it very beautiful, the colors, the blue dress, the white scarf, the green in the back, but it was out of focus. And as an architect, I'm a maniac, and I couldn't stand this image that was out of focus. I thought, what a pity, I'm not going to be able to use this image. So that image stayed there in the archive for 6 years. I created 25 different installations and projects, 25 different exercises from 94 to 2000. And by the year 2000, I had decided to close the Rwanda Project, not to move further. I had the psychological need to get out, because it was consuming me mentally, physically, psychologically. I had to get out. And so I did a final review of all the images again and again. And I stopped once more in front of that image that is out of focus, that beautiful image out of focus. And then only at that moment, in the year 2000, 6 years after the genocide, I realized how important that image was. And I started having a dialogue with myself. And I told myself, but Alfredo, this is it. When you're trying to communicate the reality of someone to someone else, it's impossible. How can you do that? And so you cannot do it. So that's why all the works are exercises that failed. And I thought, but perhaps this is it. This image is the sign that I was looking for. That everything we do as artists, when we speak about someone else, is out of focus. It can never focus properly, because we can't, because I'm talking about the life of someone else. And I'm trying to transfer this information that I've received myself to a third person. How do you do that? It's impossible. You cannot transfer that life experience from her to me and from me to you. So in the end, we have to recognize that everything we do is out of focus. So that became my most important work, in a way, from Rwanda. And I like the fact that we don't see her face, so I'm respecting her privacy. And she's gone, and she started a new life. But that is the story behind that work. And it's titled 6 Seconds because I speculated. Of course, it's not a scientific reality. I speculated that perhaps it wasn't more than 6 seconds that I spent with her. And that's where the title is coming from.
Thank you very much, Alfredo. I think there's no more comments or questions. Yes, I think we have a little bit of time limit, right? With 5 more minutes, so if you want to, please go ahead. Just ask you to use the microphone. Thank you.
Hi. So my question is relating to the idea of the context and responding specifically to a particular context, and thus being the first exhibition on the African continent relating to the work in Rwanda. So how did you reassess the material and work together with the people who are in the space to formulate the best way to communicate with the audience that you predicted would be exposed to your Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. No, I have not reassessed anything. The work is the work. It was created between 94 and 2000, and it has been shown, as Koyo mentioned, in many places around the world, and it has been shown exactly in the same way at Zeitz Museum in Africa, in South Africa. I had shown the work via lectures and conferences in Africa before. I had done conferences about this work in Rwanda itself, and in Angola, and in Mozambique, in Namibia, in Nigeria, but those were just conferences. I had shown them, via visuals, projections, and so on. But this is the first time the actual work, and of course it's the same work that has been shown everywhere else that came to Cape Town. What perhaps we did slightly differently, and this is because of Koyo's vision, we have produced what I understand is a free publication. Maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm not wrong.
No, it's totally free.
Yeah, it's a free publication, which is really a very precious catalog with essays and most of all, individual essays on each one of the works to facilitate the reading of the work for those that would have more difficulties with contemporary art. But that's, and I support and I agree totally with that gesture. And so that would be the only, let's say, adaptation we have made for the exhibition at Zeitz. The posters, the Rwanda posters that were shown in Sweden in 1994 were printed in South Africa, and they are shown in the space as they were in the streets of Malmö in Sweden, without any text, any comments, no names, no telephone number, nothing, exactly as they are. And every single work is following the same logic. So in other words, we are treating the audience in exactly the same way everywhere the work has been shown.
Thank you very much. I think we're really running out of time. So thank you again for being here, Alfredo. Once again, thank you so much for the wonderful work. We're going to hopefully have you in Cape Town in the new year. We're going to work hard towards that. And Koyo, thank you for joining in the car. We're seeing you very soon back home.
Thank you.